back to order. It is Thursday, May 13th, 2021, and we are resuming meeting number 27 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, which started on April 13th, 2021. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members can attend either in person or virtually using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. And like always, just a reminder, no screenshots, no photos permitted of the screen. And I believe, just to verify, we don't have anyone in person, correct, Mr. Clerk?
That's right. No members are in the room.
Okay, so everyone is attending virtually. Just a reminder to select at this point your interpretation channel if you haven't already done so. Put yourself on gallery view and remember to unmute and mute yourself after you're done speaking. We do have a speakers list from last time. The speakers list will, however, just a second here. So who we have on the speakers list right now is, I'm going to drop the people that aren't here. Ms. Lambropoulos is not here. She was second on the speakers list, and Mr. Luzon is not here, who was fourth on the speakers list. So that leaves us with Mr. Callaway being first on the speakers list and Mr. Blakey being second on the speakers list. That carries forward from the last meeting. Then, of course, whoever else wishes to speak, we are on Mr. Turnbull's amendment still at this point. And you could just raise your hand in the toolbar below if you wish to speak to that. So, Mr. Callaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to give my time to MP Turnbull, please.
Okay, and Mr. Callaway, is it Callaway or Kellaway?
It is Callaway with a K.
Callaway. Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Okay. I guess if you want to give up your time, the appropriate thing would be for me to go to the next speaker, and then Mr. Turnbull would be added to the bottom of the list. So, Mr. Blakey, you would be next.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, but I'm happy to be taken off the list for now.
Okay, so Mr. Turnbull, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really great to be back on PROC today, and welcome everybody. Good to see you. I know our last meeting was certainly a bit frustrating for people. I know I sensed that among many of the members, and I'm hoping today we can have a very productive meeting that's focused on how we move forward. I know for me, I have quite a few desires and concerns about the bill C-19 and sort of thinking about that and the importance of that. And I think we've been, we've been engaged in an extended debate for quite some time, and that really focuses on, an issue that happened many months ago. And from my perspective, it would be great if we could, if we could move on from that. And I know the opposition parties, despite some of the differences of opinion, were entertaining or looking to propose something today, and we had asked for that in writing. I know that that those conversations were likely being had between last meeting and this meeting, and I hope that maybe we'll hear from them today as to what they would propose. I don't know if they're ready to do that today, but I certainly was hoping and optimistic and really looking forward to having an open discussion with the hopes of moving beyond, this moment where I think we have a little bit of a deadlock in our conversation. So just wanted to say that really looking forward to hopefully hearing from opposition parties if they're prepared for that, and would welcome any of those comments from my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Shanahan and then Mr. Blakey.
Well, I'll be happy to cede my place to Mr. Blakey.
Okay, yeah, sure. Sometimes it's helpful to hear from another party. Mr. Blakey?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, what I think I can report is that, as requested by members of the government side, there has been some discussion among the MPs of the other three parties on the committee. We don't yet have a proposal in writing as was asked for, but we are still committed to preparing one. We had offered to try and come to a final written proposal in time for today's meeting, provided that the way was clear as of the end of last meeting, with the amendment dispensed with one way or another. Of course, we didn't have that vote, which we take to mean we have a longer deadline in order to come to an agreement. We had indicated that sometimes those talks do take time, and indeed they do. So we will be happy to share what we have when we have it, but that time is not now. And so if, of course, we always, welcome a vote on the issues before the committee, but if that's not the desire of some members, we're prepared to continue hearing debate on Mr. Turnbull's amendment.
Okay, Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Chair. And since the opposition, I don't know if there's anyone else who would like to speak to this, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak further to Mr. Turnbull's motion, because amendment to the original motion, because indeed, I think it goes to the heart of our parliamentary process, and I find it's really a privilege for me to be able to contribute to that debate, because indeed, et j'aimerais continuer mes remarques.
And I would like to continue my remarks in French. When I see in the motion and in Mr. Turnbull's suggested wording pertaining to paragraph A, with regard to the invitation made to the Prime Minister, well, Mr. Turnbull is recommending that this paragraph be deleted. And I agree fully with all of the reasons behind this amendment, because we know that we have a tradition here, a very well-founded tradition, such that the Prime Minister, despite the fact that he is the representative, or rather he is the first minister, he's one among a team of ministers. There's a whole team working with him. And based on my understanding, it was Pablo Rodriguez, the leader in the House, who came to explain and give reasons for the prorogation that we experienced last August, because I believe that that fits with the principle of transparency, if I understand correctly. Colleagues here are asking, this is what they would like. They want to understand the reasons behind prorogation. But, Madam Chair, I believe that we were here together when the colleagues from this side did indeed provide these reasons when Mr. Rodriguez appeared before the committee. It wasn't just to answer a few questions. There was already a report that had been made to the House with regard to the reasons for prorogation. And the reason was the pandemic. It is the most important event of our century thus far. And if opposition colleagues don't want to accept this need for a prorogation of Parliament to give the government the opportunity to do a complete reset in the approach, in the priorities of the government, well, there is no other reason apart from a war that I could invoke before this committee. The calls to have the Prime Minister appear before the committee, well, I understand the Prime Minister has provided testimony before the Finance Committee last year, and I believe that all committees like to meet with the Prime Minister because it's good publicity-wise. But in fact, this flies in the face of our parliamentary system that says it's not just one individual who's responsible for the decisions made by the government. Rather, it's cabinet as a whole, and the Prime Minister is responsible for delegating authority. And when Minister Rodriguez appeared before this committee, he stated that last summer it was obvious that we were experiencing a completely different environment compared with the situation in 2019 after the elections in 2019. And as the Prime Minister himself stated publicly, there's nothing more transparent than speaking publicly back in August with the announcement of prorogation. He stated that Canada was at a crossroads. And it was an important crossroads, not only to get out of the pandemic crisis, but also to plan ahead for after the crisis. Because it's one thing indeed, it's one thing to make proposals, but it is important that we have a plan to guide people, Canadians, for the future. Therefore, I believe that there are perhaps others who would like to intervene. And I would like to give this opportunity to colleagues, so I will stop here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see, I guess I'm used to one. I don't see any hands up, and I wasn't expecting you to, end your speech there either. So I'm caught a little off guard. But I guess since I don't see any hands up, then I would take it that the will of the committee is then to move to a vote on the amendment. Okay. Mr. Clerk, would you mind helping us with a vote on Mr. Turnbull's amendment?
Yes, I will, Madam Chair. The question is on Mr. Turnbull's amendment. Mr. Turnbull,
Yes.
Mr. Bagnall,
In favor.
Mr. Sims,
Yes.
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway,
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio,
No.
Mr. Nader,
No.
Mr. Lukiski,
No.
Mr. Kent,
No.
Monsieur Terrien,
No.
Mr. Blakey.
No.
Madam Chair, motion defeated 5-6. Amendment defeated 5-6. My apologies.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, I guess that part was an expected outcome. So that is that. We are back on the main motion. Mr. Turnbull, you have something to say?
Yeah, on the main motion, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I am really sorry that my colleagues didn't support my amendment, which I thought was an attempt to be reasonable and appease some of my colleagues from across the aisle, but obviously that didn't carry. I know the original motion, I still have quite a few concerns with this original motion. I know it focuses on an extraordinarily burdensome production of documents. It's got all kinds of other things in it that I have pretty, significant issues with, that I take issue with, and I would like to express my views on. Also, we know that opposition parties seem to be focused on prorogation and trying to link it to We Charity. I just note that recent media report came out on the Ethics Commissioner's investigation on this that has said that the Prime Minister it was not in a conflict of interest. Therefore, it just sort of goes to the heart of what, our members have been saying for quite some time.
Point of order, Madam
prorogation.
Chair. Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio.
I just want to be ensured that when we talk about these things, that we're not misleading anybody, because the report indicated one thing, but did find the Minister of Revenue in 3 counts of against the ethics. So I just want to ensure, as Mr. Turnbull is talking about this report, that he does not mislead the committee and ensures that, yes, the Prime Minister may have been waived on some of these things, but the Finance Minister was found in three counts of breaching ethics. So thank you.
Okay. I guess that's, you can put your hand up, Ms. Vecchio, if you want to speak to that more afterwards, but it is a point of debate.
Are we allowed to mislead, though? I guess that's my question, misleading.
I mean, Mr. Turnbull can explain in which part you may feel he was misleading, but I think he's speaking to the PM. But I mean, you're free to also speak to this issue, and I'm sure it'll give everyone lots of material if you wish.
No, I don't take offense, Madam Chair. I don't take offense because I would never mislead anyone intentionally or even unintentionally. If obviously I'm not perfect, but I'm really reporting that what the media is reporting, which is that the Prime Minister has been cleared of any conflict of interest, which is what I just read. So if you want me to refer you to the article in the media, I'm sure you can look it up yourself, Ms. Vecchio, but I just am reporting to the committee what I've just heard, and this is breaking news. So and it's good news. And it also, I think, speaks to the heart of what we've been debating for quite some time, that opposition parties have been really adamant about sticking to wanting to hear from the Prime Minister on prorogation. But really, it seems that, that from my perspective anyways, it seemed like that really centered on an argument that somehow prorogation was used to cover up something nefarious. And, so I think this is relevant. I think what I've been trying to say all along is that we've tabled a report for the first time ever, which gave a rationale for prorogation, and that this was a decent rationale, that it really makes sense, that it's supported by evidence, the timing was right. We could quibble about whether the timing could have been better, but I really feel that the timing was right, and it did give the government an opportunity to reset, to reevaluate, and to essentially move forward in a way that was more relevant to the changing context within a global pandemic. And that to me seems very rational. So we've been entertaining and staring in the rearview mirror and looking at prorogation and studying that and talking about that and debating that for quite some time. I really feel at this point, and many of the members on our side have said this in the past, which is that we really have important business before us. We've just had Bill C-19 be referred to us from the House, and I know this was voted on. I think it was something like, it wasn't quite unanimous vote, but it was very close to it. I think there was only one member that voted nay on C-19. So I think we have important work to do that really, to me, is pressing, given the fact that opposition parties have numerous times over the last month or two voted that they don't have confidence in our government, and this could trigger an election. And so I think that the health and safety of Canadians within a general election should be our highest priority right now. I really think that that Bill C-19 deserves our attention. It is within our mandate as a committee to look at anything to do with the election of members of Parliament. So I really think that it would serve the interests of Canadians, and I really feel like leadership in government should always be focused on the interests of Canadians. And especially in a global pandemic, when opposition parties seem to be trying to take down the government, or at least threatening to do so from time to time, which to me could very well put our democratic process at risk, and Canadians' ability to participate in a fair and democratic process could be jeopardized to some degree by that if the chief electoral officer doesn't have the powers that are within Bill C-19, which is adaptation powers. There's several, I think around long-term care, we've all expressed concerns, and we did some great work on studying this, but I really think we need to move on from this particular debate and get into the work of Bill C-19. Of course, this doesn't mean that we would Ms. Vecchio's motion would still be on the table to return to. But I would, given all of this rationale that I think is quite substantial in my view, that I move that the committee proceed to study Bill C-19.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, can you help us with that?
Yes, I can, Madam Chair. The question...
A vote on, just in case everyone's wondering, a vote on the motion to move to C-19 was the request. C-19. C-19 also has been referred to our committee already, and an email was circulated to all members, just so you have, wanted to just verify you got that email and all the information that was contained within it. There were a lot of links on the bill and material for all of you. So what we be voting on at this point is to leave Ms. Vecchio's motion, I guess, as is. It would still remain there, and we'd be moving to discussion on C19.
That is correct, Madam Chair. So I'll proceed to the vote on Mr. Turnbull's motion. Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Mr. Bagnall.
Yes.
Mr. Sims.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
No,
Ms.
sorry about that.
Thank you. Mr. Nader.
No.
Mr. Lakiski.
No.
Mr. Kent.
No.
Monsieur Terrien.
No.
Mr. Blakey.
No.
Madam Chair, motion defeated 5-6.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. We're back on Ms. Vecchio's motion then. Okay, seeing. All right, so we have a speakers list on this at this point. Mr. Blakey, Mr. Turnbull, and then Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know those dilatory motions are non-debatable, but I did just want to say, I mean, I do think it's important that we find a resolution to the impasse that we've gotten into over Ms. Vecchio's motion before moving on. I do think that if the Prime Minister's own proposal for how to try and curb political abuses of prorogation is going to work, this committee has to get it right on the first go. We're the ones setting the precedent for how that mechanism works. I've said before, I don't think it's the ideal mechanism. I think actually a debate and vote in Parliament on prorogation is the best way to try and avoid political abuses of prorogation. But this is what's currently on offer, and I am committed to trying to make it work as best as possible. And I don't think that a situation where PROC doesn't report back to the House is a great situation to be in. So I do think we need to try and solve this impasse rather than simply move on, so that the record shows some kind of path forward for how to make this a meaningful mechanism rather than just a platitude that was written into the standing orders that essentially leaves nothing unchanged. In Mr. Turnbull's previous remarks, you know, what came out for me very clearly was that the request for documents in Ms. Vecchio's motion is a sticking point for Liberal members of the committee. That's helpful information that may help inform some other discussions that are taking place. What I also heard, however, was an emphasis on the idea that somehow, you know, the desire to have the Prime Minister appear is just about the We Charity scandal. It is also about the We Charity scandal. There's clearly, we heard in testimony, people who believe that there is a link between the political circumstances of the We Charity scandal, and if not the ultimate decision to prorogue, which may have been in the works anyway, although we haven't seen any evidence of that. I believe when the government House Leader was here and was asked when the government began asking questions about what a prorogation would look like, how far in advance of Bill Morneau's resignation did that take place, the answer was a matter of days, not a matter of weeks or months. So, I mean, it does show that there is a connection of the timing there. I won't belabor that point. What I'll say is that the real importance of having the Prime Minister come to this study, which is quite different than appearing on just about anything else, is that the Prime Minister alone is the decision maker in respect of prorogation. This isn't about how another minister made a decision within their department that it's their job to defend. It isn't even about a decision around the cabinet table. Ultimately, prorogation is a decision of the Prime Minister. We've heard that very clearly. In fact, Liberals at this committee have used that fact to motivate a defense of the Prime Minister, saying, look, at the end of the day, it's up to him and a prime minister doesn't even need to give a reason. I mean, we've heard that verbatim out of the mouths of Liberals at this committee. So fair enough. That's why it makes sense to hear from the prime minister. So if we want to take the emphasis off We Charity, and it doesn't go away because it is part of the story, and put it on prorogation, which is what this study is about. You know, Mr. Turnbull earlier said the opposition seems very focused on the question of prorogation. Indeed, we are, because we're very focused on the topic of our study. I know some Liberal members have kind of lost their way on relevance, but we are actually studying prorogation. So we are actually interested in prorogation, and we listen to the testimony and taken note of the fact that the prime minister is the decision maker. So I mean, this study calls for the prime minister's presence in a very unique way that is not true in the general way that Ms. Shanahan was referring to, you know, when governments kind of make decisions as a collectivity and ministers are there to represent not just their department and their own decision making, but the collective decision making of government. Decisions around prorogation and dissolution, which is also an important and relevant topic at the moment, as Mr. Turnbull highlighted in his own remarks about the possibility of an election. These are powers that rest alone with the prime minister. And that's why it's really important to have the prime minister here. It is very much about prorogation. Yes, there will be questions about We Charity. I'm sure there will also be questions from committee members about the circumstances of the pandemic and how that contributed to a discussion. The advantage of having the prime minister here is to get to know the mind of the decision maker, because we all have our feelings about why prorogation happened, why it happened when it happened, why it lasted as long as it did. The point of having the person at committee isn't in the way that we have, you know, an impartial jury at a trial. It's an accountability function where we test the decision maker by asking questions and hearing their answers. And
Madam
the benefit of that isn't just for the parliamentarians at the committee.
Madam Chair.
Benefit of that is for the Canadians that we represent, who then have an opportunity to read or hear those arguments. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Sorry, just a moment. Do you have a technical difficulty, Mr. Sims, or is the point of order?
Well, that's an ongoing situation, but since I'm in rural, but nevertheless, no, that's not my point. Can I pull out the Sims protocol?
Absolutely, yeah.
I just looking for a point of clarification on an issue, and I'm trying to make this quick. He mentioned that he has, and I know he does have on the order paper, a motion regarding the procedures of dissolving Parliament, but is it also to deal with this issue as well on prorogation? Like I thought it was one and not the other. If it's both, and he did mention that he wants to bring this to the House, but I understand from what he just said, it's already in the House waiting to debate. Is that correct? Thank you.
Oh, I think you may be referring to a motion that I put on the order paper in respect of the confidence convention. And that is very much about dissolution. But I think, you know, what I think is important here in the context of this study is that we report back on prorogation. And while those powers aren't identical, they are similar in that they're both an instance where the prime minister has a unique prerogative. Technically, it's a prerogative of the Crown, but we all know that the Governor General only acts on the advice of the Prime Minister in this respect. And so, you know, that it's a similar power that has very much to do with the efficacy of Parliament and the ability of Parliament to meet and the ability of Parliament to hold the government to account. The Prime Minister can dispense with that either by proroguing Parliament, as we saw late last year, or by dissolving Parliament altogether and trying to have a new Parliament. And so I would say that the questions of prime ministerial judgment are similar. They're about how he exercises a certain power in relation to Parliament's capacity to meet, but they're not the same. I'd be very happy to have that study of the Confidence Convention and to see the committee make some recommendations in that regard as well. But what we can do right now, because it's before us, is the question of prorogation. So I just wanted to be clear that the interest in the Prime Minister isn't about the We Charity in and of itself as it stands alone. The interest in having the Prime Minister here is because he alone is the decision maker in respect of prorogation. And we heard that. I believe the government House leader even said something to the effect in his testimony that, you know, you could have a debate about the timing, but at the end of the day, those decisions are up to the Prime Minister. Well, yeah, they are. So that's why we should really have the Prime Minister here to have that opportunity to ask questions. Asking questions is valuable, even if we think we already know the answers. Sometimes surprising things happen at committee. Sometimes you get a slightly different answer. So those things do matter. And I don't think that a written submission is an adequate substitution for that. I don't think it honors the tradition of parliamentary accountability where decision makers are subject to questioning. And that's why I think there really is an important case for the Prime Minister to come. But I do hear, that one of the sticking points for the other side is the request for the production of documents and having a lot of witnesses. And that's, that's an important thing for us to hear as we try and hammer out a way forward. And, looking towards our next meeting where we're going to start with a clearer deck now that we've been able to have a vote on the amendment. So, we're taking in all this information. I certainly am, and it'll help inform discussions on how we move forward. Seems to me everyone is anxious to move forward. So it's a question of who has the ability to break the logjam here. And when we figure that out, we'll be looking to that person to show some leadership and get us beyond this impasse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate my colleague, Mr. Blakey's remarks. As always, he's very insightful and obviously very learned about parliamentary rules and procedure. I don't share some of the perspectives, I'm sorry to say, but I'd like to just make a bit of a plea here. I know, Mr. Blakey, you've sort of said that that it really is about almost this subjective mind of the Prime Minister that you're interested in questioning or somehow holding accountable. And I get that. I get the preoccupation with the Prime Minister's state of mind. And okay, fine. I get that that's Mr. Blakey's perspective, and perhaps that's shared by some others on this committee. Now, I just want to be clear, though, from my perspective, and this is my understanding, is that no government in history, no Prime Minister in the history of Canada who's used the prerogative to prorogue Parliament, which we know is quite a regular practice, has had to table a report that gives a rationale. Not only did our Prime Minister and the government in the last Parliament change the standing orders to require this, the Prime Minister and the government of Canada followed through with tabling a report. And at no time have I really felt like opposition parties have entertained the merits of that report at any point. And I really believe that we have been very forthcoming and rational and transparent about the reasons that prorogation makes sense, that the timing made sense, that all of the themes, the data that was available, the consultations that took place, all showed up in the throne speech, and really demonstrate that the work of our government all can lead back to what was gathered during that time. We lost one sitting day. So I guess when I will also say that just from the sense of being on this committee, we did not try to block in any way doing a study on this. We fully supported the motion originally to do this study. So we did a study. We submitted witnesses. Again, opposition parties all had the opportunity to submit their witness lists. We undertook multiple meetings. We heard from the government House leader. We heard from other key officials, academics, procedural experts, historians, and the list goes on. So, we did, look at and hear from witnesses. And, at this point, it just really feels like we're stuck. But we're stuck, in my view, not because the government hasn't been transparent and willing to be held accountable or entertain the thoughts, opinions, and narratives and perspectives that are diverse as members on this committee. But really, it seems that this is an attempt to push an agenda that the opposition parties have. And it's not rational. It's not supported by the evidence information. I've been arguing this for quite some time, and I've done my very absolute best to bring forward evidence, arguments, statistics, all that show that direct line and relationship between the timing, prorogation, resetting the agenda, and what was then worked on as a result of that shifted and changed as a result of reflecting, reevaluating, and resetting the agenda. And I just feel like opposition parties have never once entertained that may actually be the reason that prorogation was done, which is a very legitimate reason. And we heard that from academics and procedural experts. We heard it loud and clear that is what, one of the main reasons that prime ministers and governments prorogue parliament. It's completely legitimate. So, and then when we get to the moment in time that we're in, which is, we've spent many months reflecting on the past. We know that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, in a third wave of this pandemic. We know that opposition parties are pushing, dangerously close to triggering an election, although they keep saying that we want an election. We keep focusing on the health and safety of Canadians. And I'm just thinking, like, it feels like we're kind of playing roulette, or they're playing roulette with people's health and safety. I think we really need to move on with the work of Bill C-19 to make sure we can come back to Ms. Vecchio's motion. Fine. If the opposition parties want to continue on that, fine. But let's not hold up progress on immediately pressing legislation that impacts the health and safety of Canadians. This is important work. If an election is triggered and our chief electoral officer does not have those adaptation powers, we know that the waves of a pandemic with different variants, with all kinds of factors that are related to this, that people's health and safety is on the line. And we really owe it to Canadians to protect our democratic institutions and to protect that process. And so, again, I would like to move that the debate be now adjourned.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, could you help us with a recorded vote on that?
Okay, Madam Chair, the question is on Mr. Turnbull's motion to adjourn debate.
Point of order.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio.
I know this is a dilatory motion, but when there's other members on the speaking list and we had wanted to adjourn the debate, I'm just looking for why we're going to a vote when we've been asking for this debate to end for the last 2 months.
You were asking for a vote on the amendment
so
previously,
it was the vote. Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mr. Clerk.
Okay.
And this does not, I'll just let you know, sorry, Mr. Clerk, it does not do away with your motion, Ms. Vecchio, just like I mentioned before, your motion would still stand. It's just to move to a different topic of discussion. Mr. Clerk.
Okay, Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Mr. Bagnall.
Yes.
Mr. Sims.
Yes, please.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
No.
Mr. Nader.
No.
Mr. Lakiski.
No.
Mr. Kent.
No.
Monsieur Terrien.
No.
Mr. Blakey. Are you still there? Or no, Mr. Blakey's
Harris
gone.
is
Mr.
here.
Harris.
I vote no.
Madam Chair, motion defeated 5-6.
Okay, we are back on the same motion, Ms. Vecchio's motion, and we have Ms. Shanahan next on the speaker's list.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So if I understand correctly, we are going back to the original motion, Ms. Vecchio's motion. And I'm pleased, in fact, because this will allow me to continue to talk about my concern with regard to paragraph A that is asking that an invitation be issued to the Prime Minister to appear before the committee. And why do I think this is not necessarily? Well, it's not necessary whatsoever, especially because at present, and for months now, indeed, I would say, no one here in Châteauguay-Lacolle, in my region, amongst our constituents who talk to us every day about various concerns, no one is questioning us about prorogation, about the reasons why we opted for prorogation. Rather, it's the complete opposite. People are happy that we gave all of our focus, especially at the very beginning of the pandemic, to the crisis. And now we've been able to turn the ship around to look towards the future, to look at what's coming. They're happy that we focused on vaccine delivery. The vaccines have arrived, and we're very pleased with the wonderful progress we've made here in Quebec with the vaccination rate. We are really not just hoping for a better summer, but we're envisaging a better summer, a one-dose summer, as the Prime Minister stated this week. In other words, we can envisage activities this summer with our families, with friends in our communities. Clearly, there will still be health measures in place, but we will be much safer than we have been over the last few months. And clearly, our objective is that in the fall, when all of those individuals wishing to be vaccinated will have been so, and I hope and believe it will be the great majority of our population, with that second dose, hopefully we'll be able to reopen our economy the way it should be. And indeed, prorogation last August, in August 2020, is what allowed us. I'm looking for the right way to say this, but it allowed us to really reset the entire government apparatus, the government machinery. Not just that, but I remember there were opposition colleagues who were worried because Parliament wasn't sitting in its normal way of sitting at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a lockdown. We did have meetings, but they weren't being held in the conventional way. But we needed to state clearly, to tell Canadians clearly what our plan was to survive through the pandemic, to combat the virus, and to come out at the other end of this pandemic. And I'm referring here, and there are colleagues on the committee, on PROC committee, who are more expert in this, who are more familiar with all the rules and regulations of the House, and who know that this was innovative on our part to require that the government explain its reasons for proroguing, because we understand that it was the government's decision, the Prime Minister's decision. It's very reasonable, and I agree completely that the government must give reasons for its decision to prorogue. So I have the report before me, and it's very clear. It's very clear, and I don't think this had necessarily been planned for in our first mandate. The need to use prorogation. No one could have predicted the pandemic. But these changes in parliamentary rules allowed us to have a report to explain the reasons for prorogation. And I think it was a good idea because Madam Chair, I think you'll agree with me. We can never educate people too much because often we're very influenced by what takes place elsewhere, especially in the US and in other countries, and we're not always aware of our own parliamentary traditions. But I think that everyone understood that clearly the speech from the throne of December 2019, well, it wasn't at all applicable in a world facing a global pandemic. So in the 2019 speech, there were priorities set out for investment and expenditures to help the country economically, for environmental issues as well. And there was also UNDRIP. Yes, all of this was important, but the priority, and I'll come back to this a little bit later, what's our priority now? It was different then. Our priority became the fight against COVID-19. So the speech from the throne that was made after prorogation clearly outlined the fact that even though we can talk about our convictions and our priorities, clearly, when your house is on fire, well, your priority is no longer how to decorate the house, but how to put out the fire. So this document that's about 36 pages long, it provides all of the detailed arguments in favor of prorogation. So you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but we had never seen anything like this before. The changes made to our rules of procedure, well, they came about. The Prime Minister made decisions and wasn't required to give any reasons whatsoever. The fact that the Prime Minister stated publicly, and I'll quote this in English, I have the document in English,
to bring it back on exactly the same week it was supposed to come back anyway and force a confidence vote. Et ça, c'est important. Donc, cette idée-là de il faut...
And that was important. Parliament, all MPs had to say whether or not they trusted the government.
We delivered 8 months ago had no mention of COVID-19, had no conception of the reality we find ourselves in right now. We need to reset the approach of this government for recovery to build back better. And those are big, important decisions. And we need to present that to Parliament and gain the confidence of Parliament to move forward on this ambitious plan. The prorogation that we are doing right now is about gaining or testing the confidence of the House. Et j'ai la difficulté de croire.
And I'm having difficulty understanding that there are opposition members here who were opposed to the idea of demonstrating whether yes or no there was confidence in the government. That was their opportunity back then.
Donc, si on continue, c'est...
If I move on, later in the speech from the throne, and it was just a few weeks later, it was when? It was, I think, the 20th of August? The 18th of August, that prorogation was announced, and we came back on September 23rd, barely a few weeks later, 36 days later. So we're not talking about 6 months here. We're not even talking about 6 weeks. I would say that it was really the bare minimum to prepare an entirely new plan to present to Canadians. So that was on September 23rd. That's when the Governor General gave the speech from the throne. And the first priority was the measures to continue to combat the pandemic and save lives. We're talking about life and death issues. That was the urgency behind all of this. The speech also aimed at ensuring that we could devote all required resources in technology and research, in the work to be done for tracing, for vaccination, and this is very important. Once individuals and families started receiving support with CERB and other emergency funding programs, well, it's the businesses that had needs that had to be met. These were major needs because it was just a matter of keeping the lights on and not losing everything overnight. So these support programs that aren't easy to put in place, this required extraordinary work, all sorts of efforts by officials, but this also required leadership, and we needed the confidence of the House in order to put these plans in place. We needed the confidence of the House. At the same time, clearly, there were vulnerabilities that had been exposed. We were all remember what happened in long-term care homes with our seniors. And often this was a result of a lack of investment long term. We saw this with families as well and with women who often were these frontline essential workers. Elsewhere in Canada, outside of Quebec, there was a shortage of available daycare, and that was a real problem. And for sure, there was a real will. And Madam Chair, people gathered together. There was a lot of solidarity. We saw it with the Black Lives Matters movement. For the first time, for the people were united because we were all going through the same health crisis, and people were open and willing to admit that there were inequities, social inequities. There was a real will, and there still is. I'm very pleased that at Châteauguay-Lacolle, we have young people, we have young groups and entrepreneurs and citizens who gathered together to be united and to help vulnerable groups, either because they are racial minorities or because they have socio-economic problems. So people are united, and we hope that it will remain like this in the future. And since there seems to be hope and the fight against climate change, I think that people now understand what a crisis is about. And they are aware that we cannot control nature. And if we don't do our best as human beings to take preventative measures to avoid a crisis, because if it happens in a part of the world, it could have an impact on everyone on Earth. And I think that the fight against climate change, and I saw a documentary with Greta Thunberg, and I've seen what she's been doing during this pandemic year, and she keeps on working, and it's very inspiring to see her going on. So we are aware that we have this opportunity to make changes, to change our behaviors, not only to be more healthy, but also for a healthier environment. So that was the ideas that were underlying the throne speech. That is how important it is to table a plan, but also to present a vision that could inspire Canadians. Last September, we thought, oh, well, we've had the first wave, and we hoped that we would get through this, but we were not sure. As we all know, winter was really tough, and the spring too.
with the third wave. So I can't figure out how we could have carried on and maintain this government last year with the throne speech that wouldn't have been relevant, because it's a question of being proactive. Our prime minister and the government decided that, well, we're going to be very transparent. And before all MPs, he asked, do you trust what we're doing? Some of them didn't trust him. Well, it's up to them to say why. But at least we had enough people who trusted us and who trusted the plan we tabled, because that's what helped us move forward. And that showed us the way to go to get out of this crisis. And sometimes it was very difficult. We didn't have a crystal ball. We didn't know whether we would turn left or right, or whether we would open this or close this. It was like a lab. Sometimes, in some parts of the country, they tried a certain approach. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. So I think that we should get answers to this quite soon. So that was the idea underlying the prorogation of the Parliament. Minister Rodriguez tabled this report at the House of Commons. And from what I heard here, he came before PROC to answer questions, but some people are saying, well, that's not enough. It takes us the Prime Minister, Mr. Rodriguez, is not the one we want to see. But I'm sorry. I always like to speak to the grassroots. And I want to look at the mandate of the committee to find out what we have to do. Because sometimes we're not on the right track, or we're trying to do something that has nothing to do with the work we do here. But here is really the place where we can talk about the fact that the government is responsible for saying what accountability is about at the cabinet, for instance. For instance, Minister Rodriguez, it's up to him to explain MPs, to explain to the MPs what is the rationale of the report, and to give explanations. He's the one who is in charge of giving all these explanations and answering questions.
for a while, I've been noticing a problem, but I hadn't had them say anything with the sound. Is it okay for them? I hear the interpreter coming through fine, but your original sound seems to be crackling, going in and out, Ms. Shanahan. And I'm just wondering whether they're just not waiting for me to pick up on it, or
Madam Chair,
it's fine for them. Yeah.
Madam Chair, they've indicated to me here in the room that everything is fine on their end.
Okay, so maybe it's just on my end. I continue to hear her sound to be cutting in and out. But I figured since nobody else had said something, I would let it go. But it was getting worse for me, so I thought I would say something at this point. But that if it's fine for the interpreters, then it's okay. The interpretation part is coming through quite clear to me. It's just the original sound keeps cutting in, cutting out. Okay. Sorry, Ms. Shanahan, I probably ruined your, I hope you still know you're the spot you were at. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. C'est très important.
It's very important that you can hear the interpreters clearly and that the interpreters can do their work properly. Well, I'm referring to a document that was prepared by the Treasury Board Secretariat in 2005. And it was a kind of overview of the various responsibilities of ministers. And it was an overview of what they are accountable for. It's interesting. I'm going to quote a few excerpts from this report in English.
Together as the ministry form the government of the day, exercise executive authority in this system being the Westminster system of parliamentary democracy. And these ministers are accountable to Parliament, both individually and collectively. All accountabilities in Canadian government flow from ministers' individual and collective accountability to Parliament. So, although Parliament does not exercise executive authority, it is the principal guarantor of the government's accountability, scrutinizing the government's policies and actions and holding it to account. Parliament has a spectrum of tools for doing this, ranging from its role in the passage of legislation to the review and approval of public expenditures, to the interrogations of question period. And I'm going to get back to question period in a bit. You'll see why it's relevant. But while the specific tool may vary, the environment remains constant, that of partisan politics. This is in a Treasury Board document. Parliament and its processes are inherently political. And I would like to just say there, la notion du partisan.
The concept of a partisan, for several Canadians, it has a negative meaning. But what does it mean, partisan? It means that most of us, elected members, we are part of a political approach, a kind of putting together ideas and values of policies. It's a way of approaching the world. We are sharing in each of our political parties
la même vision de comment s'organiser puis régler les problèmes, puis comment faire le gouvernance de notre société. Donc, il n'y a rien de mauvais dans ça. C'est juste, il faut appeler un pomme une pomme. Là, quand il y a une raison partisane pour quelque chose, bien là, il faut le dire. Il y a une raison partisane parce que c'est quoi l'objectif de chacun des partis? C'est sûr, c'est de faire lire le monde, puis pour la plupart des gens, des partis, pas toutes, là, je sais que c'est pas l'objectif du Bloc québécois de tout.
I don't know about anybody else, but
Interpretation. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I wasn't getting the interpretation. I hear Ms. Shanahan and the interpreter in English. And I would like to congratulate Ms. Shanahan on the quality of her French. I truly appreciate her efforts. Well, my studies were in history in Chicoutimi. So that's why I understand. Well, I saw Concordia in the background. Yes, Chicoutimi, my degree from Chicoutimi is just on top of it. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Perhaps it was my fault. I shouldn't be switching back and forth. No.
We seem to be getting the translation fine here in the committee room, but perhaps the members participating through Zoom are not getting the interpretation feed. So
yeah, if me and Mr. Terrien are both having this opposite issue, but in a way the same issue, that means there is something going on. I have my proper channel on. I don't have a problem hearing Miss Shanahan anymore at all. Actually, the sound got clearer, just lost the interpretation part. But maybe we can test it out.
Okay, yeah. So
Okay.
I'll speak just for a moment. You may want to just suspend for a minute while we try to test this out. You can just suspend for a second.
We'll suspend. How about we suspend for 5 minutes for just a quick bio break?
Okay.
I'm biased. I kind of need to take one. So, but please let me know whenever somebody else does. So suspended for 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Now, just while we're testing.
just a couple of things before I give the floor back to Ms. Shanahan. Around the beginning of Ms. Shanahan, or around 12 o'clock today, I did get an email. Sorry? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to switch back and forth with screens, and I wasn't sure. I heard something from the clerk. I did get an email from Minister LeBlanc's office, and they have reached out to appear before the committee on the urgent matter of studying Bill C-19. They stated, as you know, the opposition has voted 14 times for an election in recent weeks, and it is the responsibility of all parties to make sure that the necessary protections are in place if the opposition sends Canadians to the polls. Well, that is what they wrote. I'm just reading what they wrote, and just wanted to let you know that it's up to the committee really at the end of the day who they want to see as witnesses and whether we move to that study. But just wanted you to all be aware that I did receive that email and I forwarded it to the clerk as well. And also that our window is narrowing in on the main estimates. We still do have those witnesses on the sidelines waiting if you do want to call them before. I don't know, considering what Mr. Blakey said earlier, if that may be the reason I'm stating it, maybe it gives parties the time to have some space before they move on to whether they're having a vote on this issue or moving on to another study. It might make some space to do something else in the meantime, but it's really up to the committee again. Last time on Tuesday, I felt there was no desire to maybe even undertake the main estimates, but I'm not sure if that was the thoughts of everybody. Nobody really verbalized it. I just got a lot of no responses to the questions. So my guess was that there was not that much interest in doing the main estimates, but I don't want to mistake that by you just not wanting to have started them this week versus after the constituency week, maybe there is interest in taking up the main estimates. So just let me know if you are interested once again, because we have those witnesses on standby. So those are just the two announcements, the email I received and the main estimates.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yep.
I'm wondering whether you're open to a discussion of the message from the minister.
If the committee wishes, I am open. Yes. Would you like to say something to that, Mr. Kent?
Sure, I'd be delighted if
okay.
If you accept.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, certainly, I believe everybody on this committee wants to get to the consideration of Bill C-19. And we are reminded often by Minister LeBlanc, other ministers, and the Prime Minister that committees are the masters of their agenda and of their decisions.
Yes.
And if I can offer to Mr. Turnbull's earlier remarks and Ms. Shanahan's remarks, I believe that in the Westminster system of government, any efficient and effective minority government needs to govern with a certain pragmatic humility. And we have seen for the past 2.5 months, Liberal members filibustering still today, refusing to accept the will of the committee. And we could quite easily move on to C-19, the estimates, with a vote and the committee accepting the will of the majority of our members to call a certain witness to complete our study on prorogation. And I think that's really where we are right now. And I think that Minister LeBlanc's urging notwithstanding, I think it's time for a little bit of that pragmatic humility and for Liberal members to accept the will of the majority of the membership of this committee.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Kent. Anybody on that issue? Mr. Blakey and then Mr. Bagnall.
If I may, on that same topic, I would certainly echo Mr. Kent's call for what he's calling pragmatic humility, which I think is a nice turn of phrase. I would also just say I'm a little confused by the message. The minister insists that the opposition has voted for an election on a number of occasions. There seems to be running together some pretty significant lines. It seems to me that if the entirety of the opposition, that is to say all three official parties, had voted for an election, we'd be on the hustings right now and not at a Liberal filibuster. So I mean, there's an incongruity between the minister's message and the truth of the matter. Of course, there are opposition parties who have been working very hard to try and avoid an election, recognizing that that takes some willingness on the part of the government to negotiate and to not act as if it had a majority. And, you know, to the extent that we've been able to succeed in that endeavor so far, that's been a good thing for Canadians, I think. I think that's something that ought to continue in some way, shape, or form. The NDP may not always be the dance partner. We saw on a pretty critical piece of legislation for the government, legislating Montreal port workers back to work and denying them their collective bargaining rights, that Liberals have been able to find partners with others like the Conservatives. So, you know, depending on the issue, it's a different partner. That is the way that minority governments work. So I find the minister's statement to be misleading, in that if all of the opposition parties voted for an election at the same time, we would have one. They haven't. In fact, we're in the House today debating, and I also appreciate the opportunity to explain to my colleagues. I had to leave for a little bit in order to participate in that debate in the House about whether it makes sense to have an election during this pandemic. And I had the opportunity to hear in the small amount of debate that I was able to listen to, representatives of all the opposition parties explain that they don't want an election, and to make a point that the only path to an election that continues to persist is the Prime Minister's prerogative to dissolve Parliament unilaterally. That's the only path right now to an election. It's on the Prime Minister alone to close that path by making a commitment, a clear public commitment, that he won't use that power to trigger an election. And despite all the many occasions he's been offered by the opposition to make that commitment, despite not needing one, you just walk out of his front door and hold a press conference, as he has many times during this pandemic, and make that statement. So we've tried to provide opportunities just in case he hadn't put that together himself. And yet, even in those opportune moments, he's declined to make that commitment. So I just, again, puzzled by the minister's message, and not quite sure how it helps move things along here. And I would certainly hope that not only the members of the government on this committee, but that members of the government at large would be seeking to help us resolve this impasse rather than complicating matters further. Thank you very much.
So if I can just, before the next speaker goes, just state, I was also, when I was reading the email, just questioning whether I should just convey the concept or whether I should read out the email for the most part the way it was written. And I figured maybe I should just read out the way it was written, and you can take from it what you will, so that I know Mr. Blakey have pointed at some messaging, some things that you may have heard a couple of times. I figure it's fair, if you're going to hear it later on today or in QP or somewhere else, that you hear what and how it's being framed. So that is how it's being framed, and there it is. So make of it what you wish, and we will move on to Mr. Bagnall.
Thank you. And I'm very disappointed I have to leave in a minute here. It was great to be back on PROC with Mr. Nader, and some good times. And I always appreciate listening to Mr. Blakey. But I have to disagree I don't understand his point about it's the only route to an election. We've been very close, within 20 votes, or less than 30 votes, a number of times recently to an election. And but the point I wanted to make is I've been in Parliament since the year 2000 or so, and from what I understand is that it's a tradition in Parliament. It's a procedure that we follow by rote. That when bills are sent to committees, that's a priority on the committee agenda. Certainly, different opinions on whether the study and where a study's at, and if there's certain motions with unreasonable clauses that could take a long time. I would think the precedents in committee, the standard that's normally followed, is that committees move on to the debate on what has been referred to them, especially in an urgent situation where Canadians are at risk. Because, as I said, we've been less than 30 votes away from an election a number of times. It's not inconceivable. And so I just wanted to make that point before I have to leave. And hopefully I'll get back, because I had a whole bunch of things I wanted to say today back on the motion, but I don't think we should be saying them right now, because we got an urgent bill before us that will affect the safety of Canadians and will affect the ability of some older people to vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're on mute.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, so on the issue of the email still, Ms. Vecchio, you'd like to speak to that? I'm not sure if I have the correct speaking order, but I think Mr. Bagnall was the last one.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And
Okay.
back to the email, and with all due, I do recognize that the block today has a motion put forward as well. So I totally appreciate where the minister is coming from, but I do believe it's the membership of this committee who ultimately needs to make the decision here. This decision has been delayed now for over 2.5 months. So I recognize it's easy to throw the onus on the people that have not spoken for the last 2.5 months while filibustering. But I think we've all said that we recognize that we need to get to Bill C-19, that it is important, because we do know that there has been a lot of concerns of going into a federal election. I've heard Dr. Duncan speak of that. I've heard us all speak of that, concerned about the safety. I don't think that's neither here nor there. I think part of the thing is we know that is one of the most important things that we get to. But also we have known since February that this bill is coming forward, since in December it was actually put on that. So for the last 2.5 months of wasting time is exactly what we've done. We've wasted 2.5 months of actually getting to the work that we need to do. I do know that, as I've heard from all other opposition parties, there still seems to be one thing that's outlying, and I've heard Ms. Shanahan refer to part one of being the Prime Minister of our original motion. And, I think these are just really big concerns. C-19 can get to C-19 can get to be studied if we actually find a final decision here. And I think that's what we're waiting, is a decision on this motion. So after going on 3 months, we're still waiting for a decision.
Sure, absolutely. And I did definitely remind the committee after reading the email that it is up to the members of the committee and your will, whether you wish to invite the minister or not. And it's up to all members, the opposition members and the government members included. So I think that's all we have for the email for now. And if you're okay, I'll give the floor back to Ms. Shanahan then.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to check, is the interpretation working properly? Is everyone able to follow me in English? Yes.
A problem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no interpretation.
Okay. And you did when the discussion was happening earlier? It just happened when Ms. Shanahan spoke?
Yeah, let me try and...
Or you probably didn't need it earlier. Yeah.
Let me try and move this about. Sorry, Fred. Try again, please. My apologies.
Okay, donc, oui, j'essaierai.
Yes. I would be delighted to continue my speech from earlier. So I'll continue, Madam Chair. I simply wanted to underscore something. I'm not a permanent member of the committee, but it seems to me, and I was listening to the interventions of opposition members, and it seems to me that we've just had 2 votes here. And indeed, we could have simply set aside the debate underway here to work on C-19, which is so important. But they voted against, and I must admit that my research work was done. It's an issue that I'm very interested in, and I would like to pursue with regard to the principle of responsibility, ministerial responsibility, and the roles that we play in our parliament. Our Westminster Parliament.
In English for clarity, again from the Treasury Board of Canada report, 2005. I was speaking before about the roles of ministers. And so just to summarize, what is clear from this overview of responsible government are the distinct and finely balanced roles of each of the system's different players. Ministers exercise executive authority on the basis of the political support that they receive from Parliament. They therefore have political accountability to Parliament. Parliament, in turn, does not exercise executive authority, but it ensures that executive power is properly exercised. And its mechanism for doing so are political and partisan. Donc, je trouve c'est intéressant des.
So it's sometimes interesting, I believe, to have this in-depth reflection on the whys and wherefores with regard to what we do here. I also found something else that doesn't perhaps relate directly to this issue, but the report deals with the roles of ministers vis-à-vis the roles of officials, and since that was the subject of several discussions, who's responsible for what, who should appear before committees, etc.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, and sorry to MP Shanahan, but the translation is coming through at the same level for me.
Okay.
And that's just a change. Like, so I'm hearing French and the English at the very same level.
Sorry, Miss Shanahan. I don't know. Ever since you've started, somewhere or another has been having problems with translation.
Is anybody else having the same problem?
I don't know. It's really hard for me to make the call of whether it was the same level, but it was a lot noisier.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, it's Justin in the committee room again. It's coming through fine here in the committee room. I wonder if maybe for Mr. Long, it might be one of the settings that he has. I think if he goes to the, just one second here. Let me get some advice from the technicians in the room. Madam Chair, would you want to suspend while we're trying to do this briefly?
Sorry, what did you say, Mr. Mark?
Would you like to suspend while we're trying to figure out what the technical issue is?
Okay, let's suspend for 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Suspended.
Thank you.
Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I hope that the problem is solved. For my colleagues, I'm going to quote, to give you more quotes in English, and which I find interesting for the committee.
Council observed in the 12th annual report to the Prime Minister on the Public Service of Canada, so that was some time ago, I think in the early 2000s, we cannot build systems based on distrust. And this is just going to this whole accountability and, you know, what we're trying to have as our rules. We cannot go backwards, building layers of hierarchy and rules governing each transaction. And we cannot treat all errors the same way. Errors made in good faith are inevitable, especially in an organization that values innovation and creativity. Accountability requires that we report honestly and accurately, including the errors, and demonstrate that we have learned from the mistakes and have made the necessary adjustments. But accountability cannot become mere blaming. Et je suis contente de citer ça parce que
I'm happy to cite, to quote this, because that's what we've seen over the last few months. Yes, parliamentarians have the right to ask questions. We want them to ask questions that require explanations. The government, with its executive authority, must be accountable. But at the end of the day, it's important to find out whether the government acted bona fide. Do we trust the government? So once again, parliamentarians have this opportunity to show whether they trust the government or not. And up to now, we have gone through several confidence votes since the beginning of the pandemic. And as my colleague mentioned earlier, not all parliamentarians voted in favor of maintaining the government in power, but some of them thought it was a good idea. But for those who voted against the government, it means logically that they want to have an election. So I'm going to refer to this question. What is the present priority? Well, I think it's that we have to make sure, as with the Bill C-19, that we have measures that have been implemented in order to organize a safe election, if ever it had to happen. So now I would like to go back to the idea of collective solidarity of the cabinet, and it's very important. It's extremely important, and it's quite unique in a government system that within this government, well, we know that they took oath and they accepted to take this responsibility to stick to confidentiality rules. And to express the will and the policies of the government. So in English, once again.
It's ministerial responsibility of cabinet refers to the convention requiring coherence and discipline of the ministry in deciding policy, managing government operations, and speaking to Parliament with a single voice. Donc, c'est chaque membre.
So every member of the cabinet should be able to speak with the same voice at the Parliament. And we notice this during the QP. Questions are asked to the Prime Minister, but he is not always the one who answers these questions, because the convention has existed for a long time, and it says that another minister who might have more information, who is responsible for the file or for the issue, but so it could be somebody else. It's up to the members of the cabinet to decide who will answer the questions during the QP. And excusez-moi de vous interrompre. Je ne sais pas. Enfin, il faut s'en tenir au protocole. Madame la Présidente, il y a.
I think I'm having it too, and I can't hear because everything is so loud. Clearly, but anyways, what I was trying to say, Ms. Shanahan, is it okay for Mr. Blakey to interject?
Yes, if I have the floor after his
yes.
interjection, yes.
Yes, you would have the floor. Let's just wait to see if the sound issue is resolved.
Madam Chair, it should be resolved now.
Okay, thank you.
Am I coming across okay for all the members of the committee with this translation?
Can you speak in French, Mr. Blakey?
Oui, je pourrais parler.
Yes, I can speak in French. I would like to quote something, but I won't be able to do it in French. Is it working well as a test?
It was just for the sound check.
Oui, c'était
ending that you carry on in French. I just know you can, so I figured you could do it for the sound check.
Right on. So I'm coming across okay, Madam Chair, and I'm okay to go.
Yeah.
I just want to say, you know, I'm appreciating Ms. Shanahan's discussion of the nature of collective responsibility for cabinet. I would draw her attention to the House Procedure and Practice book on page 30, which talks a little bit about this, but also emphasizes that ministers do have individual responsibility as well. So we read on page 30, in terms of ministerial responsibility, ministers have both individual and collective responsibilities to Parliament. The individual or personal responsibility of the minister derives from a time when the Crown governed in practice and not just in theory. Ministers advise the sovereign and were responsible to the sovereign for their advice. The principle of individual ministerial responsibility holds that ministers are accountable not only for their own actions as department heads, but also for the actions of their subordinates, etc. Virtually all departmental activity is carried out in the name of a minister who, in turn, is responsible to Parliament for those acts. Ministers exercise power and are constitutionally responsible for the provision, conduct of government. Parliament holds them personally responsible for it. If you then go to page 392 of House Procedure and Practice, under the discussion of prorogation and dissolution, it reads, prorogation of a Parliament, a prerogative act of the Crown taken on the advice of the Prime Minister, results in the termination of a session. In the note on that line, 110, it reads, see decision of the Committee of the Privy Council, PC 3374, on October 25th, 1935. The memorandum regarding certain of the functions of the Prime Minister, which states that recommendations to the Crown concerning the convocation and dissolution of Parliament are the special prerogatives of the Prime Minister. Indeed, if you go to that order in Council, what it will tell you is that this is a special prerogative of the Prime Minister, specifically delineated by Cabinet as an exception to the normal convention of collective responsibility, which is not to say that Cabinet Ministers aren't required to defend it, but it is to say that the Prime Minister plays a unique role here. It's listed alongside things such as the appointment of Cabinet Ministers. Now, I don't think that we would want to say that, you know, the government house leader or any other minister is somehow responsible for the decisions of the Prime Minister in the composition of his cabinet. Yet the decision to prorogue is laid beside that very prerogative of the Prime Minister. So I think that's very clear that in addition to collective responsibilities, members of cabinet have individual responsibilities. And when we talk about prorogation, it is a very special prerogative of the Prime Minister that's been singled out by the Privy Council itself as laying firmly on the shoulders of the Prime Minister and not as a collective decision of the Cabinet. So I would invite any reflections Ms. Shanahan may have on those authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Okay, the floor goes back to Ms. Shanahan.
Well, indeed, and I thank Mr. Blakey for that, because that leads me to my next point, which was exactly the role of the Prime Minister. And bear with me, if you will. I am not a lawyer, but I was a student of history, and I find that in the lessons of history, which we are making every day, right? We see that there's theory and there's practice. And this is where I want to go now, because we also see, again, in this same report, which I see in the references, calls upon not only, of course, procedures and practice, but on many experts in the field, the role of the Prime Minister in the assignment of responsibility. So the leader of the political party that appears able to form a government that will have the confidence of the House of Commons, normally the party with the largest number of seats, is asked by the Governor General to form a government. This is the defining responsibility of the Prime Minister, to select the ministry and to organize the cabinet, both as a decision-making body and as a mechanism for setting the broad direction of government policy and operations. Ministers are accountable to the Prime Minister, who is, in effect, the steward of the collective responsibility of the cabinet. So you cannot separate one from the other. The Prime Minister does not operate independently of his ministry, because autrement dit, on aurait...
In other words, I mean, what you could have said was that what you might be saying is that the Prime Minister simply just acts on his own as a leader of the country, and that he doesn't need to even appoint other people around him. That he can just simply make all these decisions himself in what I would say would be in a rather dictatorial fashion, but that's not the case. Yes, he has responsibilities. However, those responsibilities include the cabinet. And ministers are responsible through a delegation of powers that they're given by the Prime Minister. And they're responsible for certain functions. For example, Mr. Rodriguez is government leader in the House of Commons, and his responsibility is to deal with other parties represented in the House and to provide explanations, answer questions regarding House operations. And that is what was done. That is exactly what Mr. Rodriguez did when he presented his report to Parliament, which spelled out all the reasons underlying prorogation. So this was all done. And the purpose of Ms. Vecchio's motion, especially with respect to the first part, were already dealt with. And I'd like to wrap up with the Treasury Board report. When there is any mismanagement or abuse of power, in English it says once again
that Parliament has a somewhat blunt instrument for sanctioning mismanagement. It cannot apply personal sanctions to individual ministers beyond political censure, and withdrawal of support for the government via a vote of non-confidence is a significant threat only in the case of minority governments. Mais c'est justement là où on est. On est dans un...
And that's what we're in right now. We are in a minority government. The purpose of the prorogation was to have an opportunity to reflect once so that a plan could be brought forward in the speech from the throne. You know, we were in a crisis, and it is with prorogation that we were able to come forward with a new plan. And parliamentarians had an opportunity to show their satisfaction or lack of satisfaction with the way the government had been managing its affairs. So as I was saying in the beginning, prorogation is not the hot topic in my riding. The hot topic in my riding is COVID. It's the pandemic. How are we going to get out of the pandemic? And thank goodness that we have a plan. Thank goodness we see all these levels of government working together. And even if it isn't easy to do this, we know that there were different ways of approaching the problems. However, I am someone who believes in communication between individuals, in working for the well-being of our citizens. That's why we were elected, to represent our constituents. And if we had a government that was taking all kinds of steps that they weren't explaining or that weren't based on science, I would have difficulty with that if our government weren't consistent with its responses to the pandemic. If I were in the opposition's shoes, I would have liked to have an opportunity to vote non-confidence in the government if that were the case. And so what we did was to be very clear with our steps. Mr. Blakey expressed his wishes, and I really do appreciate our exchanges with Mr. Blakey and Mr. Sims and other people here who really are involved in are interested in the nitty-gritty, the details of procedure and standing orders. And I don't think there's anything preventing this committee to conducting its studies and to continue its study. However, we have an urgent situation before us now. At times, there can be various issues. There can be problems. There can be mistakes. Sometimes governments have fallen. And so in this committee, especially with an order from the House, we have to make sure.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio.
Sorry, I'm just not sure what the plans are today. I'm seeing that there's a list of speakers that are going to be continuing to speak. I know that we have postponed lots of things, and if we're just going to continue to filibuster, I think that's one of the things I'm looking at. I would actually like to perhaps move for suspension so that we can come back and actually have a real discussion rather than continuing this filibuster. So perhaps everybody can go back and decide what they're going to be doing, because we do have a motion on the floor that could be voted on, so that we could open the gate and we could open that as well. But perhaps this might be a good opportunity for the government members to decide what they want to do. They know what we're asking for. I know that's the case, but we're continuing to filibuster. So I would like to put forward an opportunity to suspend at this time.
Madam Chair, is that a point of order? Can I speak to that?
You can definitely speak to it, because I was going to put it back to the committee to see if there's consensus on suspending.
Yeah.
And so, yes, go ahead, Mr. Turnbull.
I just want to speak to that. I know today we allowed, I know that members of this committee last time were considerably frustrated with the fact that they wanted to clear the deck, as Mr. Blakey had put it, and propose an amendment to Ms. Vecchio's motion, which obviously we're still in debate about because we haven't agreed with that from the beginning. I wonder whether if we suspend today's meeting, whether the opposition members are actually going to put forward an amendment, because that's exactly what I thought was supposed to happen today and did not happen today. So
Brian, it was supposed to happen on Tuesday.
Sorry, I wasn't finished talking.
Sorry, I just wanted to correct. It was Tuesday that we asked for that, but that's good.
No, if I may finish, I was just saying that, you know, between meetings, I understood that that was forthcoming. Based on a sincere effort to want to move forward, we, you know, sort of allowed the amendment that I had put forward, which was a compromise, or at least we felt it was, to go to a vote. And so fine, that got voted down, and that's fine. But I just want to clarify whether opposition members are really interested in working with us and putting forward a good faith amendment that maybe we can work on. So is that forthcoming?
Mr. Blakey?
What we committed to do last day was to sit down together and to develop a proposal in writing for the government. And we are working towards that goal. We didn't take there as being a deadline for today because we weren't able to dispense with the amendment on Tuesday, which was the sign of good faith we had asked for at that time. Pleased to see that happen today. And I'll certainly be doing everything that I can, and I take from our discussion so far that other opposition members, you know, not wanting to unduly speak for anyone, but I think there is a real good faith attempt on our part to develop a way forward, to propose something to government in order to break the logjam. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to deliver a written proposal for how to move past this before our next meeting. And so, you know, of course, if Liberal members of the committee are really anxious to get other things on the record today, certainly welcome to do that. But I think given that we are on the cusp of trying to get to a new proposal, if members would prefer to suspend now so that we can get to question period on time and do other things in our day, I'm certainly happy with doing that as well. What we can't do while we're listening attentively to committee, as we do, is have those discussions to, to try and get to a final conclusion on the opposition bench. So it's really up to folks on the committee what they want to do, but I certainly would support a suspension at this time. And I think you'll find that there is a proposal in writing to government prior to our next meeting, unless we're unable to come to an agreement, in which case that will also be an interesting fact about this process.
So having heard 2 or 3 different points of view on this, unless there's any other points of view, is it okay if I suspend until the next scheduled meeting? Okay, suspended.